Assumptions are quiet. They don't announce themselves. They sit in the back of the mind, unnoticed, shaping decisions before anyone realizes a decision was even made. That's what makes them dangerous. In that moment, those two men didn't stop to think. They didn't ask questions. They didn't read the room. They made a fast judgment based on what they saw and what they believed they already knew. One woman, smaller frame, calm posture, no visible threat. Their assumption wasn't that she couldn't fight. It was worse than that. Their assumption was that she wouldn't. People get hurt when assumptions replace awareness. They get hurt when confidence is built on stereotypes instead of facts. Those men believed the situation was under control because they believed the story in their heads. They thought physical dominance was guaranteed. They thought surprise was enough. They thought embarrassment would do the work for them. In their version of events, the moment ended the second she hit the floor. That belief shaped their next move, or rather, their lack of one. The problem with assumptions is that they freeze you in time. Once you believe you understand a situation, you stop observing it. You stop adjusting. You stop preparing for resistance. Those men didn't see danger because they decided danger wasn't there. They didn't look for hands positioning, balance, breathing, or posture. They didn't consider training. They didn't consider context. They didn't consider the audience. They assumed the outcome before the action finished unfolding. Assumptions are comforting because they make the world feel predictable. They allow people to move fast without thinking deeply. But predictability is an illusion, especially when other human beings are involved. Every person carries a history you can't see, training you can't recognize, experience you can't measure by appearance alone. When you assume, you strip complexity down to something simple enough to ignore. That's when mistakes turn into injuries. This isn't limited to physical confrontations. Assumptions operate the same way in conversations, leadership, and conflict. People assume silence means weakness. They assume calm means fear. They assume restraint means inability. Over and over, history shows the opposite. Some of the most capable people in any room don't advertise it. They don't need to. They wait. And when forced, they respond with precision rather than noise. Those two men mistook restraint for submission. They thought the lack of immediate reaction meant success. They didn't understand that not reacting is often a choice, not a limitation. By the time they realized the situation wasn't what they believed, the gap between assumption and reality closed fast. And it closed violently. Assumptions don't just hurt the person making them. They create unnecessary escalation. When you underestimate someone, you force them to prove you wrong. When you corner someone based on a false belief, you remove their options. At that point, survival, training, and instinct take over. What could have been avoided becomes inevitable. What could have been a misunderstanding becomes a moment people remember for years. The irony is that assumptions feel like confidence. People mistake certainty for competence. But real competence is flexible. It questions itself. It watches closely. It leaves room for unknowns. The most dangerous person in a room isn't the loud one. It's the one who hasn't assumed they already know how things will end. Every serious injury that starts with "I didn't think" is really saying "I assumed." Assumed it was safe. Assumed the other person wouldn't resist. Assumed nothing would go wrong. Assumed strength, control, and dominance were guaranteed. The moment those assumptions crack, reality rushes in to replace them, and reality doesn't care how confident someone felt seconds earlier. What happened on that floor wasn't just a physical response. It was the collision between belief and truth, between arrogance and preparation, between a story people tell themselves and the one that actually unfolds when pressure hits. Assumptions build stories that feel solid right up until the moment they fail. And when they fail, they don't fail gently. Training doesn't look impressive until it has to be. Most of the time, it's invisible. It lives in repetition, in boring drills, in small corrections no one applauds. Size, on the other hand, is obvious. People notice it immediately. Height, weight, reach, volume. Those things feel convincing. They feel like proof. That's why people trust size first and skill later, if at all. But size is potential. Training is access. A bigger body means nothing if the person inside it doesn't know how to move under pressure. Strength without control burns fast. It relies on adrenaline, momentum, and intimidation. The moment any of those fail, size becomes clumsy. It overcommits. It telegraphs. It tires. Training teaches the opposite. It teaches efficiency. It teaches timing. It teaches how to do more with less and how to stay calm when everything is loud. People who train don't panic when plans fall apart because they expect resistance. They expect chaos. Every drill assumes something will go wrong. Grip fails. Balance shifts. Opponent reacts differently than predicted. Training isn't about memorizing moves. It's about learning how to adapt when the first move doesn't work. That's why size loses its advantage so quickly against skill. Bigger bodies take longer to recover when balance breaks. Longer limbs are easier to trap. Heavier weight works against you when it's redirected. Training turns physics into a weapon. It uses leverage, angles, and structure instead of force. A trained person doesn't fight the body. They fight the position. There's also the mental side that people underestimate. Training conditions the nervous system. It teaches the body how to function while the heart rate spikes and the hands shake. Untrained people experience stress as confusion. Trained people experience it as a signal. They don't freeze because they've been there before, hundreds of times, in controlled environments that prepared them for uncontrolled ones. Size depends on dominance. Training depends on discipline. Dominance collapses the moment someone pushes back effectively. Discipline holds even when things don't go as planned. That's why trained individuals often look calm in moments where others lose control. They're not braver. They're familiar with discomfort. Another mistake people make is assuming training is about aggression. It's not. It's about restraint. A trained person knows exactly how much force is required and no more. They know where damage happens and how fast it can occur. That knowledge creates precision. It also creates confidence that doesn't need to announce itself. When size wins, it usually wins early. When training wins, it wins decisively. There's no prolonged struggle because the goal isn't to overpower. It's to end the threat. A joint only bends one way. Balance only holds within certain limits. Pain is predictable when applied correctly. Training understands these limits intimately. Crowds tend to cheer for size because it looks dramatic. Big movements. Big reactions. But those moments are deceptive. What actually decides outcomes happens in inches and seconds. Hand placement. Foot position. Weight distribution. Breathing. These are not things you learn by being bigger. They're things you learn by being corrected over and over until your body stops making the same mistakes. People also forget that training removes hesitation. When you know what you're doing, you don't pause to wonder if it will work. You execute. Hesitation is where size loses most often. Big, untrained people second-guess once resistance appears. They didn't expect pushback. They didn't expect counters. That moment of confusion is all training needs. Size is a single advantage. Training is a system. It covers offense, defense, recovery, and awareness. It prepares for failure as much as success. That's why training travels with you no matter the environment. Crowded room or open space. Standing or on the ground. Loud or quiet. It doesn't rely on ideal conditions. In rooms full of professionals, size stops being impressive quickly. Skill recognizes skill. Trained eyes notice posture, movement, and choices. They can tell who's dangerous before anything happens. That's because training leaves patterns. Calm breathing. Efficient motion. No wasted effort. When people say training beats size every time, they don't mean size never matters. They mean size alone is never enough. Without training, size is just mass waiting to be misused. With training, even a smaller frame becomes a tool capable of control, damage, and survival under pressure. Chaos doesn't create character. It reveals it. When everything is calm, people can perform a version of themselves they've practiced socially. They can sound confident, appear capable, and move with purpose. Chaos strips that away. It removes time, comfort, and predictability. What's left is whatever has been trained, rehearsed, or burned into muscle memory. Most people think they'll rise in chaotic moments. They imagine clarity arriving when pressure hits. In reality, the opposite usually happens. Cognitive overload narrows perception. Fine motor skills degrade. Breathing becomes shallow. The brain reverts to familiar patterns, not aspirational ones. In chaos, people don't become better. They become more honest. That's why preparation matters more than intention. Good intentions disappear the second adrenaline spikes. What remains is habit. The body follows what it knows, not what it hopes. If someone has never been tested under stress, their first exposure to chaos becomes the test itself, and tests without preparation rarely go well. Chaos exposes decision-making speed. Some people hesitate because they've never had to choose quickly with consequences attached. Others move immediately, not because they're reckless, but because they've practiced making decisions under time pressure. They trust their training more than their thoughts. In high-stress environments, thinking too much is often the problem. It also exposes emotional control. Chaos amplifies fear, anger, and ego. People who rely on intimidation or dominance tend to unravel when those tools stop working. Their emotions spike, and their actions become erratic. Trained individuals experience the same emotions, but they've learned how to function alongside them. They don't wait for calm. They operate inside the noise. Crowds make chaos worse. Noise, movement, and attention multiply pressure. People behave differently when they know they're being watched. Ego pushes them to act bigger, faster, louder. That's when mistakes compound. Chaos feeds on performance. The need to save face often overrides the need to make good decisions. Skill shows up quietly in these moments. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't posture. It adjusts. It finds structure inside disorder. While others react to what just happened, skilled people are already responding to what's about to happen. They see patterns forming even as everything looks unpredictable to everyone else. Chaos also reveals priorities. Some people focus on winning. Others focus on survival. Others focus on control. Those priorities dictate behavior. Winning often leads to overextension. Survival leads to panic. Control leads to efficiency. The difference is subtle but critical. Control seeks to limit variables. It reduces chaos rather than feeding it. People often mistake chaos for randomness, but it isn't random. It's just fast and unforgiving. Every action still follows cause and effect. The difference is there's no pause between them. Mistakes are punished immediately. Success compounds quickly. There's no room to recover from poor judgment. This is why training environments simulate chaos. Noise, fatigue, confusion, unclear signals. The goal isn't comfort. It's familiarity. When chaos feels familiar, it loses some of its power. The brain stops treating it as a threat and starts treating it as a problem to solve. Unprepared people waste energy fighting the feeling of chaos. They want it to stop. They want clarity before acting. Prepared people accept it as the environment. They don't wait for ideal conditions. They adapt to what's available. That adaptability is what separates control from collapse. Chaos also removes the luxury of explanation. There's no time to justify actions or negotiate outcomes. Whatever someone does is the only thing that matters. Intentions don't count. Appearances don't matter. Results do. That's uncomfortable for people who rely on perception rather than capability. When chaos hits, hierarchy flattens. Titles, reputation, and assumptions lose meaning. The only authority left is competence. People instinctively follow whoever seems most in control, not whoever claims leadership. Control becomes visible through movement, voice, and decisiveness. In moments like these, people learn who they actually are under pressure, not who they believe they are, not who they want others to see. Chaos pulls that truth forward without asking permission. It exposes gaps in preparation and strengths people didn't know they had. The aftermath of chaos is often filled with stories and excuses. People rewrite events to protect their self-image. But the body remembers what happened. So do the witnesses. Chaos leaves a clear record of who was ready and who wasn't, who adapted and who froze, who imposed order and who became part of the disorder. Confidence is loud when it has nothing backing it up. It fills space with posture, tone, and bravado. It tries to control the room before the room has a chance to respond. On the surface, it looks convincing. People mistake volume for certainty and certainty for competence. That illusion holds only as long as no one challenges it. The moment skill enters the equation, empty confidence starts to shake. Not immediately, but subtly. Movements become rushed. Decisions lose precision. The person who relied on belief instead of ability suddenly has to perform, and belief isn't enough. Confidence without skill has no foundation. It's standing on air, and pressure is what makes it fall through. This kind of confidence depends heavily on compliance. It assumes others will hesitate, back down, or be impressed. It expects fear to do most of the work. When that fear doesn't appear, confusion sets in. The confident person wasn't prepared to solve problems. They were prepared to be obeyed. That's why collapse happens so fast. There's no transition period. 1 second, everything feels under control. The next, nothing makes sense. The tactics that worked socially don't work physically or strategically. Posturing fails against mechanics. Volume fails against timing. Ego fails against structure. Skill doesn't argue with confidence. It doesn't need to. It simply exposes it. A skilled response cuts through the noise and forces reality into the moment. Suddenly, confidence has to justify itself. It has to produce results. When it can't, it turns defensive or reckless. People with real skill don't rush to prove themselves. They don't need validation. Their confidence is quiet because it's internal. It's based on experience, repetition, and failure survived. They know what they can do because they've done it before under less than ideal conditions. That knowledge doesn't need to be announced. False confidence is fragile because it's borrowed. It comes from past wins that weren't tested, from size, from authority, from reputation, or from environments where resistance was minimal. Once those supports disappear, the confidence has nothing to lean on. That's when panic starts to leak through the cracks. Collapse often looks like aggression. When confident people feel exposed, they double down. They try to overwhelm the situation with speed or force. This only accelerates the failure. Aggression without control creates openings. It increases mistakes. It hands advantage to anyone who knows how to stay composed. There's also a cognitive collapse that happens. The mind races, trying to catch up to events it no longer controls. Decision-making becomes reactive instead of intentional. The person stops choosing and starts flailing. Every move is a response to the last problem instead of a step toward resolution. Skill, on the other hand, slows things down. Not externally, but internally. A skilled person experiences time differently under pressure. They're not calmer because they're fearless. They're calmer because they recognize the patterns. Nothing feels completely new. Familiarity creates space, and space allows control. Confidence that's earned behaves differently. It doesn't spike when challenged. It adjusts. It's flexible. It doesn't depend on dominance to function. If something doesn't work, it shifts without ego getting in the way. That adaptability is impossible when confidence is tied to self-image instead of ability. One of the biggest dangers of unearned confidence is that it invites confrontation it can't survive. It encourages people to step into situations they haven't prepared for. It convinces them they're capable before they are. The gap between belief and reality becomes a liability the moment resistance shows up. Observers often misread these moments. They're surprised by how quickly things turn. But the collapse didn't start at the point of failure. It started much earlier, when confidence replaced preparation, when reassurance replaced practice, when image replaced competence. Every environment eventually tests what people bring into it. Not gently, not fairly. The test doesn't care how confident someone feels or how certain they sound. It only responds to what actually works. When confidence has nothing behind it, that test doesn't take long. Skill doesn't need to announce itself because it knows the moment will do the talking. Confidence without skill needs the moment to go exactly as expected, and moments rarely cooperate. When they don't, when reality pushes back even slightly, the collapse isn't gradual. It's immediate, visible, and irreversible once it starts unfolding in real-time. Public failure doesn't fade the way private mistakes do. There's no quiet space to process it, no chance to rewrite the moment before anyone else sees it. It happens in real time, in front of witnesses, and once it does, it belongs to everyone who was there. People remember it not because they want to, but because the shock of it locks the image in place. When failure is public, the body reacts first. Heat in the face, tight chest, shallow breath. The mind scrambles for control while the moment keeps moving without permission. There's no pause button, no rewind. Whatever happens next becomes part of the memory too. Every second after the failure either deepens the damage or defines how it's remembered. What makes public failure so powerful is contrast. It usually follows confidence, expectation, or posturing. The higher the confidence, the sharper the fall. People don't remember steady outcomes. They remember reversals. They remember moments where someone went from certain to exposed in seconds. That contrast burns into collective memory. Witnesses play a role, even when they say nothing. Eyes widen. Conversations stop. Attention sharpens. Everyone understands they're watching something unrehearsed. That shared awareness makes the moment heavier. It turns an individual mistake into a communal experience. Public failure strips away explanations. There's no time to clarify intent or justify decisions. All that exists is what people saw. Context disappears. Nuance vanishes. The story simplifies itself. Someone tried. Someone failed. The image becomes the truth, even if it's incomplete. This is why people fear embarrassment more than pain. Pain passes. Embarrassment lingers. It replays at night. It resurfaces in conversations. It gets referenced years later. Public failure follows people because others attach meaning to it. It becomes a label, fair or not. Attempts to recover often make things worse. People rush to explain, argue, or deflect. That reaction signals insecurity and invites scrutiny. Silence feels dangerous, but often does less harm. Once a public failure happens, control over the narrative is already gone. The crowd fills in the gaps. There's also a difference between failing publicly with dignity and failing publicly while unraveling. Witnesses notice composure. They notice restraint. They notice who owns the moment and who tries to escape it. Even in failure, behavior matters. Sometimes more than success. Public failure is unforgettable because it violates expectations. People expect confidence to be rewarded. They expect dominance to work. When those expectations collapse, the brain flags the moment as important. It becomes a reference point, a warning, a story people tell others. In professional and social environments, these moments quietly reshape reputations. One visible failure can outweigh dozens of quiet successes. It's not fair, but it's human. People trust what they've seen under pressure more than what they've heard in calm moments. The harsh reality is that audiences rarely analyze deeply. They don't ask what led to the failure. They don't consider unseen variables. They remember the outcome and the emotional impact. That memory becomes shorthand for judgment. This is why preparation matters so much when others are watching. Not because failure is impossible, but because public failure multiplies consequences. It doesn't stay contained. It spreads through retelling, exaggeration, and time. Each retelling smooths out complexity and sharpens humiliation. Some people learn from public failure. Others are defined by it. The difference is rarely talent. It's self-awareness. Those who understand what happened and why can rebuild quietly. Those who deny it or blame others stay trapped in the moment, replaying it without resolution. Public failure also exposes ego. It shows how tightly someone's identity is tied to winning, dominance, or image. When that image cracks, whatever is underneath becomes visible. Resilience shows. So does fragility. People never forget the first time they see someone lose control of a situation they claim to own. That image replaces the claim. Words lose credibility. The visual memory wins. Long after details fade, the feeling remains. The awkward silence. The sudden shift in energy. The sense that something irreversible just happened. That's why public failure stays alive in memory. It's not just about what went wrong. It's about how exposed the moment made someone feel, and how clearly everyone else could see it at the same time. Preparation doesn't announce itself. It doesn't posture or demand attention. It shows up quietly, often mistaken for calm or even hesitation. Fear, on the other hand, is loud. It rushes thoughts, tightens muscles, and pushes people to act before they understand what they're doing. When the two meet, preparation doesn't try to overpower fear. It moves through it. Most people believe fear is something to eliminate. They think being prepared means being fearless. That's never been true. Fear doesn't disappear under pressure. It spikes. The difference is how someone responds to it. Unprepared people react to fear by trying to escape it. Prepared people accept it as part of the environment and continue anyway. Preparation builds a relationship with discomfort. It introduces stress in controlled doses. Fatigue, confusion, resistance, failure. Over time, the nervous system learns that fear doesn't equal danger. It becomes information instead of a command. That shift is subtle, but it changes everything about how someone performs under pressure. When fear takes over, it narrows focus too much. Vision tunnels. Hearing fades. Time distorts. The body prepares to survive, not to think. Preparation counteracts this by creating automatic responses. Actions don't require debate. They happen because they've happened before, hundreds of times, in training that felt repetitive and unglamorous. Fear speaks in urgency. Do something now. Do anything. Preparation speaks in options. If this fails, do that. If the angle changes, adjust here. Fear demands speed without direction. Preparation allows speed with control. This is why prepared people often look slower at first. They're not rushing. They're selecting. They're reading the situation instead of being swallowed by it. That patience can be mistaken for uncertainty by observers who equate movement with confidence. In reality, it's clarity. Preparation also removes the need for emotional validation. Fear often comes from worrying about how things will look if they go wrong. Embarrassment, judgment, failure. Prepared people focus on function, not appearance. They care less about how they're perceived and more about what works. That focus silences a large portion of fear. Another overlooked aspect is recovery. Fear drains energy quickly. It leaves people exhausted after short bursts of action. Preparation conserves energy. Movements are efficient. Breathing is controlled. Tension is minimized. That efficiency allows prepared individuals to outlast fear-driven reactions. Preparation doesn't guarantee success. It guarantees response. When something goes wrong, prepared people don't freeze. They adjust. Fear freezes people because it overwhelms decision-making. Preparation keeps decisions small and manageable. One step, one adjustment, one action at a time. There's a humility built into preparation. Training assumes you might fail. It plans for mistakes. It accepts imperfection. Fear is often rooted in the desire to avoid mistakes entirely. That's an impossible standard. Preparation replaces it with resilience. People who rely on fear-based confidence tend to collapse when something unexpected happens. Their confidence was built on everything going according to plan. Preparation assumes plans will break. That assumption becomes an advantage the moment reality deviates. In high-pressure moments, words stop working. Internal pep talks fail. Logic struggles to keep up. What remains is behavior. Preparation shapes that behavior long before the moment arrives. It turns reaction into response. Observers often say prepared people look fearless. That's not accurate. They're feeling fear like everyone else. The difference is that fear isn't driving the steering wheel. It's sitting in the passenger seat, acknowledged but not obeyed. Preparation is built in quiet hours when no one is watching. Early mornings. Repetitions that feel pointless. Corrections that bruise the ego. Those moments don't feel heroic. They don't feel dramatic. But when fear shows up uninvited, preparation is already there, steady, practiced, and ready to act without needing permission from doubt.